On a lonely Christmas day, a forgotten little boy meets a pale stranger in a red velvet coat at a bus stop. Unaware, he is the vampire king wearing Santa's clothes. Touched by the child's words, "Mom said Santa forgot us again." The ancient monster breaks his own dark rules to give the boy a night of magic, proving that even a king of shadows can grant a Christmas miracle. Some nights change a life without anyone noticing. This is the story of the Christmas when the vampire king met a little boy who believed Santa had forgotten him for good. Snow pushed sideways through the empty street, scratching softly against glass and metal as if the whole city were whispering. The last shop had just turned off its lights, leaving only the bus stop glowing under a tired yellow lamp. Wreaths hung on the poles, and a lonely speaker on a nearby cafe kept playing a slow, cheerful carol that didn't match the frozen pavement or the biting wind. On the bench, beneath that flickering light, sat a man in a deep red velvet coat, his pale hands resting perfectly still on his knees, as if the cold could not touch him at all. To anyone passing by, he might have looked like a strange, tired version of Santa Claus who had lost his way. The fur lining on his coat was real, soft and white as new snow, and a heavy black ring clung to his finger like a small piece of night. His hair fell over his shoulders in a silver curtain, shining against the dark red, and his eyes, if you were brave enough to look into them for more than a second, held a steady, unnatural glow somewhere between ember and blood. He did not slouch. He did not shiver. He simply watched the empty road with an old patience that no human had time to learn. He had many names, whispered in many languages, but tonight he answered to none of them. To himself, he was simply the king, not because he ruled with crowns and armies now, but because the shadows of half the world still bent when he walked through them. For centuries, he had commanded creatures of the dark, broken tyrants, ended wars from behind curtains, and then disappeared before anyone could speak his name. Yet here he was, sitting at a city bus stop like a man with nowhere special to go, pretending to wait for a bus he did not need. Once every 100 years, when the winter moon grew thin and sharp, he walked among humans on Christmas Day. It was an old promise he had made to a dying boy long ago, a promise to remember that the world was not only made of fear and hunger. He would move through their streets, listening to the small heartbeats of their joys and sorrows, reminding himself that he did not exist only to take. This year, though, the walk had left him tired in a way battles never had. The laughter from warm windows scratched at his instincts. The scent of hot food drifted through doorways he could never enter uninvited. Every glow of kindness reminded him how far away from their world he truly was. He was thinking of turning back toward the dark side of the city, where he belonged, when the snow crunched on the sidewalk with the hesitant rhythm of small boots. He smelled the child before he saw him, not blood, not fear, but a tangled mix of cold wool, old chocolate, and the heavy sadness of someone who has learned disappointment too early. A little boy in a brown coat and an oversized red hat came into the circle of light, hugging a scruffy teddy bear to his chest as if it were a shield. His cheeks were red from the wind, his nose running, but his eyes were sharp and watchful, like someone who had learned to count every stranger. The boy glanced at the man in the red coat and froze for a heartbeat. The king expected the usual reaction: the step back, the nervous glance away, the animal sense that whispered, "Don't stay near this one." Instead, the child's gaze slid down to the velvet coat, the fur, the almost familiar shape of it all. His eyes widened, not in fear, but with a thin, breathless hope. He walked closer and sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving a careful space between them, as if he knew this stranger might break if he came too near. For a while, they shared the silence. Snow fell. The bus did not come. Somewhere far off, a church bell rang 9 times, each note soft and distant. The king could feel the boy shivering beside him, feel the small heartbeat fluttering too fast in the cold. A part of him wanted to turn away to let the boy leave without words. It was safer that way. People he cared about had a way of vanishing from the world, and he had promised himself, more than once, never to care again. Mom said Santa forgot us again, the boy murmured suddenly, not quite looking at him. His voice was flat, like someone repeating a fact they'd already accepted. But I thought maybe this time he'd remember, so I came here just in case. The words landed on the vampire king like the fall of snow on stones, soft, but building into a weight he could not shove aside. For a second, something ancient stirred inside him. The memory of another boy, centuries ago, staring up at him with fever-bright eyes and asking if someone would remember his name after he was gone. The king had answered yes back then. He had not expected the promise to echo through time and find him here, at a bus stop, beside a child who believed in forgotten Christmases. He turned his head slightly, studying the boy. "It is late to be waiting alone," he said, his voice low and smooth, every word carefully controlled. "Your mother, she let you come." The boy hugged his teddy bear a little tighter. "She fell asleep after work," he said. "She was really tired. She always is on Christmas. I left a note. I'll go back before she wakes up. I just wanted to see if maybe this year was different." He swallowed, then finally dared to meet the king's eyes. "You look like him, you know, Santa, but colder." The king almost laughed, and the small, surprised tug at the corner of his mouth shocked him more than any enemy blade ever had. "I am not Santa," he answered. "I am just traveling." "Well, then you picked a weird night," the boy said, and there was a tiny spark of humor under his tiredness. "Nobody travels on Christmas, except people who don't have anywhere to be." He hesitated, studying the man again. "Do you have anywhere to be?" The question hit him harder than any weapon. The vampire king had castles, secret halls, underground cities that moved when he commanded. He had servants who would kneel if he so much as breathed near them. Yet, sitting on that bench, under the weak yellow light with frozen air burning his throat, he realized he had nowhere he was expected in any way that truly mattered. His absence would not break anyone's heart. His presence would not make anyone's holiday complete. "Not tonight," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty in his own answer. The boy nodded slowly, as if that made perfect sense. "Me neither," he said. "Mom tries, she really does, but presents cost money and money makes her cry." He stared down at his boots, voice falling quieter. "Last year she promised next Christmas would be better, but then the bills came and the heater broke and she said we just have to be brave a little longer. She said Santa has a lot of kids to visit. Maybe he forgets some of us by accident." The king felt something inside him twist. He had seen empires fall, cities burn, tyrants beg, yet nothing had ever seemed so unfair as this small, resigned voice. "And you?" he asked softly. "Do you believe that he forgot you?" The boy shrugged, but his hands were shaking. "I don't know," he whispered. "I thought if he was real, he'd find us anyway, even if the address changed, even if Mom paid the rent late. Real magic doesn't need perfect houses, right?" His throat worked as he swallowed back something heavy. Maybe some kids are just too easy to skip." Somewhere deep in his chest, behind ribs that had not held a living heartbeat for centuries, the vampire king felt a pressure he had almost forgotten. Anger, yes, but not at Santa, not at the mother, not even at the cold world and its unfairness. He was angry at himself. For all the years he had walked past people like this boy, telling himself their stories were not his to change. He had power beyond imagination, and yet this child believed he was invisible to magic. A gust of wind rushed through the bus shelter, scattering a bit of old paper across their feet. The boy's teeth chattered. Without thinking, the king unclasped his heavy red coat and shifted it an inch closer, bending the air so that the cold seemed to slide around them instead of through them. To anyone watching, it would just look like the wind had changed direction. To the boy, it felt like someone had quietly built a small, warm wall around the bench. "Hey," the boy said after a moment, blinking. "It's not as cold now." He squinted at the king's coat. "Did you do that?" The king met his gaze with a hint of mischief he had not felt in decades. "Perhaps the wind got tired," he replied. "Even storms need rest." The boy actually smiled at that, a small, crooked thing that didn't quite reach his eyes but tried very hard. "You talk funny," he observed. "Like the old TV shows my grandpa used to watch. Are you from somewhere far away?" "Very far," the king said. "Farther than you can imagine." "Farther than the North Pole?" the boy asked. "Much farther," the king answered, and for a brief moment the bench seemed to hold a secret the rest of the world had forgotten. On the other side of the street, 3 teenagers stumbled out from a side alley, loud and careless, their laughter sharp in the quiet night. One of them kicked an empty bottle that skidded across the ice, bouncing near the bus stop. They looked underdressed for the weather, cheeks flushed with cheap drink and young recklessness. The tallest one spotted the boy and the man in the red coat and smirked, nudging his friends. Their steps tilted toward the bench. The king's eyes cooled. The air around him thickened, though the boy did not seem to notice. He had seen their kind before, not evil, just bored and restless, but dangerous in a way cold streets could multiply. They might tease the boy, grab his bear, shove him for a laugh. To them, it would be a forgettable joke. To the boy, it would carve a deeper cut into a heart already full of scars. The teenagers drifted closer, one of them calling out, "Hey, Santa, you taking returns this year?" Another snickered. "What you get, kid, a used teddy bear and a bus ticket to nowhere." The boy shrank a little, pressing the bear tighter against his chest. The king did not move, but something in his posture shifted, a subtle straightening that made the space around him feel suddenly taller. When he turned his gaze toward the teenagers, his eyes caught the dim streetlight and held it, red glint flashing like the edge of a hidden blade. "Go home," he said quietly. The words were soft, but they carried weight. The nearest teen stumbled a step back, his grin cracking. For half a second, their laughter died as all 3 of them met a look that was far older and less patient than any they had ever seen. None of them could have explained it later, but a chill ran up their spines that had nothing to do with the snow. Without another joke, without a single shove, they muttered something about not worth it and turned away, disappearing back into the alley they had come from. The boy watched them leave, eyes wide. "How did you do that?" he whispered. "You didn't even yell." The king relaxed his shoulders, the air around them softening again. "Sometimes," he said, "people only need to be reminded they can choose to be better. Fear is a poor teacher, but a warning look is efficient." The boy studied him, something like respect growing beside his curiosity. "You're weird," he decided, "but a good weird." He hesitated, then slid a few inches closer on the bench, closing some of the careful distance he had kept before. "If you're not Santa," he said, voice small but steady, "then what are you?" For a moment, the king considered lying. He could have said magician, traveler, even night watchman. Any of those would have been safer, simpler. But there was something about this child. The way he had stepped into the cold with hope that hurt him, the way he looked at the world as if expecting to be left behind. That made the king feel that this boy, of all people, deserved the truth, or at least a piece of it. "I am someone," he said slowly, "who has done many wrong things and a few right ones. Someone who knows more about darkness than about Christmas lights." He paused, then added with a dry twist of humor, "and someone who has not been forgotten for a very long time." The boy hugged his bear, considering that. "Then maybe you and me are kind of opposite," he said. "I haven't done many things yet, but I already know a lot about being forgotten." Silence settled between them again, heavier now, but not empty. The king looked at the boy and felt an old, dangerous thought rise inside him. I could change this. Not the whole world, not every broken thing, but this one night, for this one child. It was a thought full of risk. Every time he had tried to protect a human, the universe had demanded a cruel price. He did not know if he had the strength to pay it again. Snowflakes spun in slow spirals around the bus stop. The broken speaker across the street crackled, then shifted to a softer song, a simple melody about coming home. The boy's eyes glistened in the weak light, and his voice, when he spoke again, was so quiet the king almost had to strain to hear it. "If you're not Santa, the child whispered. Can you still make one wish come true? The vampire king, ruler of shadows, destroyer of monsters, felt the weight of that small question settle on his immortal shoulders. For the first time in centuries, his answer did not arrive instantly. He looked at the boy, at the empty road, at the snow-covered city that had no idea its fate might be bending right here on this lonely bench. His lips parted to speak. Then, from somewhere deep in the swirling darkness beyond the bus stop, a familiar, ancient voice called his true name, the name no human should ever know, wrapping it in a warning that froze even his immortal blood. He went perfectly still, and beside him, the boy waited, eyes full of fear and fragile hope, for an answer that suddenly felt as dangerous as any war. The rule he swore never to break. The sound of his true name slid through the winter air like a blade pulled slowly from its sheath. It didn't come from a mouth. It came from the darkness itself, the thin space under the bench, the alley mouths, the gap between snowflakes where light could not quite reach. The vampire king's shoulders stiffened. That name belonged to another time, another life, one he had buried under centuries of silence. The boy did not hear the word, but he felt the change. The man beside him went still in a way that had nothing to do with the cold, like a statue reminded it was once a weapon. The child's fingers tightened around his teddy bear, his earlier courage bending into quiet fear. "You okay?" he asked. "You look like you saw a ghost." If only it were that simple, the king thought. The darkness at the edge of the bus stop thickened, folding in on itself, until it took the shape of a tall, hooded figure made entirely of shadow. Snow passed through it as if through smoke. Only the eyes were clear, two silver points, bright and patient. No human passing by would have seen anything but a trick of the light. The boy saw only a slight flicker, like headlights far away. But to the vampire king, it was as clear as daylight. "You are late returning," the shadow said, its voice echoing in his mind instead of the air. "You forget our agreement, my king." The boy tugged at his sleeve, whispering, "You never answered me. Can you make a wish come true or not?" Two demands pressed against him at once, the innocent question of a child and the cold reminder of an ancient pact. For a moment, the king wanted to be human again, just long enough to choose with a human's simple heart, instead of with the weight of empires on his shoulders. He did not answer out loud. His lips stayed still as he spoke back to the shadow in the language of thought and darkness. "I remember the agreement," he replied. "On this night I observe only, I touch nothing, I change nothing. No human is bound to me, and no fate is turned from its path." The silver eyes watched him. "And yet you linger with the boy." The king's gaze slid to the child. The little face, pink from the cold, the red hat slipping sideways, the stubborn hope that refused to die even after too many empty Christmas mornings. He could have walked past. He didn't. That small choice was already a crack in his own rules, and he knew it. He asked a question, the king answered. "I am merely listening." "You are doing more than that," the shadow insisted. "You are remembering, and when you remember, you interfere. You know what happens when you try to save just one child." Images stabbed across his mind. A stone house, a burning fever, the first boy he had ever turned to keep him from dying. The child who had become a monster with a child's pain, who had started a war that painted the snow red for 100 winters. The king had sworn then, never again. Never on this night, never from pity. Beside him, the real boy shifted, confusion and hurt slowly climbing into his eyes. "If you can't do wishes, it's okay," he said too quickly, like someone trying to jump out of embarrassment before it could sting. "I know you're just traveling. I was being dumb." The king felt the words like a stone dropped into deep water. He turned back to the child, pushing the shadow's warning aside for a heartbeat. "I did not say I couldn't," he replied softly. "I only said I must be careful. Some wishes cost more than the person making them can pay." "What does that mean?" the boy asked. "It means," the king said, choosing each word like a step on thin ice, "that sometimes when you move one small thing, other things move with it. Lives, hearts, futures." The boy thought about that, his young forehead wrinkling. But if nothing changes, then sad things just stay sad forever, right? The simple truth in his question cut deeper than any ancient warning. The shadow figure took a step closer, its presence cooling the air around the king's shoulders. "He carries the scent of despair," it murmured. "And something else, courage. This is the kind of heart that draws the gloom feeder." The king's eyes darkened. "It is here." "Near," the shadow answered. "It has been following the trail of forgotten children all winter. If you warm his hope and then leave him, you will make the feast richer. If you take him, you risk unbinding the creature completely. You know the balance. Walk away now. Let the bus take him home. Let his life be small, but his own." The king could almost see it then. The boy years from now, shoulders a little more bent, eyes a little duller, telling his own child, "We don't count on miracles in this house." Safe, maybe. Alive, probably. But carrying an invisible weight that no one would name. The bus's headlights finally appeared at the end of the road, turning the swirling snow into a moving wall of gold. The low rumble grew louder, filling the quiet street with a promise of ordinary life, of heaters and flickering TVs and half-wrapped gifts someone tried to afford at the last minute. For the boy, that bus was the whole world's answer. Either Christmas would go back to normal, or tonight would become the story he told himself whenever he felt foolish for hoping. He looked up at the king as the bus drew closer, its lights blinking through the falling snow. "My wish isn't big," he said suddenly, as if the words might run away if he didn't hurry. "I don't need a bike or a game or anything. I just want one Christmas where my mom doesn't have to pretend she's okay. I want her to laugh for real, just once, even if it's only for one day." There it was, not a toy, not a miracle made of plastic and batteries. A wish tied to another person's heart. A wish, the king knew, that no spell could guarantee. The shadow hissed lightly, its silver eyes narrowing. "You cannot give him that. You can bring him jewels, food, music, but you cannot rewrite the ache in his mother's bones. Leave, my king. We have held the monsters at bay while you walked among them, but the gloom feeder grows bold. It watches. It waits. It will not let you steal away one of its sweetest meals without a price." The bus sighed to a stop, brakes hissing, doors folding open with a tired groan. Warm light spilled out, along with a puff of dry, heated air. A driver in a thick jacket glanced out, seeing only a man and a boy on a bench. "You getting on?" he called, his voice muffled by the wind. The boy clutched his bear and rose halfway to his feet, looking from the bus to the king. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was the moment that decided what kind of story tonight would be. The kind you forget because nothing happened, or the kind that changes the way you see the world forever. The king stood too, slow and graceful, his red coat shifting like a curtain. Every part of him screamed an argument, his promise, his past, the old law of his people. On the holy nights of human joy, the king of night shall not steal a single path from the light. He had written that law himself long ago with blood and regret. But the boy's small voice, trembling with courage, broke through all of it. "If you can't," he whispered, I'll still be okay. I'll just stop asking. Mom says it hurts less if you stop asking." The vampire king realized, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that walking away would not protect the child. It would only teach him that the world never answered honest hearts. That kindness looked, listened, and left. He stepped between the boy and the open bus door. The driver frowned. "Sir, you riding or not, I can't wait all night." Time seemed to stretch, the snow hanging in the air like 1,000 tiny, spinning mirrors. In their reflections, the king saw all his possible futures. One where he boarded the bus, sat in the back, watched the boy fall asleep against the window and disappear into an ordinary life he would never touch again. One where he turned and walked into the dark, letting the gloom feeder take whatever scraps of hope were left. And one where he did the one thing he had forbidden himself: interfere. He raised his hand. For a human, it would have looked like a small, polite gesture, as if he were asking the driver to wait just a second. But to the wind, to the snow, to the secret currents of magic that ran under the city's skin, it was a command. The rumble of the engine faded into a distant echo. The falling snow slowed, then nearly stopped, each flake drifting as lazily as a feather in a warm room. Inside the bus, the driver froze mid-blink, his hands resting on the wheel. The entire world dimmed to a soft, twilight blue, as if someone had turned down the brightness of existence. The boy's eyes flew wide. He looked around, mouth falling open. What's happening? The shadow figure at the edge of the shelter flared, its silver eyes burning with shock and anger. "My king," it whispered, "you have broken your own law." The vampire king turned to the child, the faint glow in his red eyes no longer hidden. "You asked me," he said quietly, "if I could make a wish come true." The paused snow hung between them like tiny frozen stars. "Before I answer," he went on, "you need to know who I really am and what kind of danger your wish has already called to you." The boy swallowed hard, but he did not step back. "I'm listening," he said. And somewhere, just beyond the circle of frozen time, something vast and hungry stirred, delighted that the game had finally begun. The thing that eats forgotten wishes. The world around them held its breath. Cars on the far street were motionless, headlights frozen in thin beams. Smoke from a chimney across the road hung in the air like a painted stroke. Even the broken Christmas song drifting from the cafe speaker had stretched into one long, trembling note. Only two hearts were still moving in that moment. The small, rapid flutter in the boy's chest, and the slow, deliberate echo of something that wasn't quite a heartbeat inside the vampire king. He lowered himself to sit again on the bench, and with a nod, invited the boy to sit as well. The child obeyed, eyes tracking every movement, part fear, part wonder. His teddy bear drooped in his hands, its stitched-on smile tilted toward the unnatural stillness around them. "When I tell you this," the king said, his voice quieter than the snow, "you may decide you do not want my help. That will be your choice, and I will honor it. Do you understand?" The boy nodded, throat too tight to speak. "I am not a traveler," the king continued. "Not really. I am older than this city, older than these streets, older than the buses, older than the electric lights and the songs on the radio. I have walked through more winters than you have had birthdays." He paused, searching the child's face for terror and finding, instead, a fierce, bright curiosity. "Some call me the Vampire King." The boy blinked, processing the words like puzzle pieces. Like in the movies?" he asked. "With capes and biting and blah, blah, blah." A corner of the king's mouth twitched. "The movies get many things wrong," he said. "But they are not completely lost. I am what humans once feared in the dark. I have drunk blood. I have commanded creatures that have never seen the sun. I have destroyed monsters who preyed on the innocent, and once I became one myself." The boy's fingers tightened slightly around his bear, but he did not pull away. His gaze searched the pale face beside him, the red eyes that should have been nightmare fuel for any child. "You don't feel like a monster," he said finally. "You feel cold, but not bad cold, just lonely." The shadow figure at the edge of the shelter flickered, as if the boy's simple words had thrown a stone into its liquid form. "He is not for you to judge, child," it murmured. The boy squinted at the space where the voice had come from. "Who said that?" The king glanced at the shadow, then back at the boy. "That is an old friend," he said. "A keeper of rules. They want me to leave you here to let your life follow the safest path, even if it is a lonely one." The boy took a slow breath, trying to be braver than he felt. "And what do you want?" That question stole the king's breath for a moment. When was the last time anyone had asked him that, with no fear, no demand, no hidden agenda. His wants had been buried under duty and regret for so long he almost didn't recognize them. "I want," he said carefully, "to keep a promise I made a long time ago. I failed one boy who asked me to remember him. I do not wish to fail another." Wind, if it could be called wind when time itself was stalled, whispered around the edges of the shelter, carrying a distant, ragged sound. Like a sigh, like 1,000 sighs woven together. The king's eyes darkened. "The thing that hunts you tonight," he said, "was born from all the wishes that were whispered and then forgotten. Every time a child said, 'Maybe next year,' and the world did not answer, a seed of bitterness fell into the dark. Over centuries, those seeds grew into something that feeds on disappointment. We call it the gloom feeder." The boy shivered, not from cold this time. Is it going to hurt my mom?" "It will try to hurt you both," the king replied. "Not with claws or teeth, with something much worse. It wants to convince you that nothing you hope for matters, that no one really sees you. That kindness is just a story. If it succeeds, you will grow up with a hole inside you where your belief used to be. You will stop asking for miracles and stop offering them to anyone else." The child stared at his boots, at the worn laces, at the scuff marks that told stories of playgrounds and too long walks. "I already feel like that sometimes," he admitted, barely audible. "Like I'm easy to skip." "And yet," the king said gently, "here you are, out in the cold, waiting anyway. That is why it wants you so much. You are proof that hope can live even when it has every reason to die." The shadow keeper shifted, its silver eyes hard. "You explain too much," it warned. "Words plant roots, roots change paths." The king ignored it. He turned his attention fully to the boy. "Do you want me to send you back to your ordinary life?" he asked, "taking away tonight like a dream? Or do you want to see what hunts you and stand with me against it?" No one had ever asked the child to stand against anything. Adults gave orders or pity, not choices. The offer shocked him. For a moment, fear begged him to say, "Send me back. Let me wake up tomorrow and pretend this was just TV in my head." But another part of him, the same stubborn streak that had dragged him out into the snow with nothing but a bear and a wish, lifted its chin. "Will you be with me?" he asked. "I swear it," the king said, "on the oldest thing I own, my own name." Something in the air trembled. The shadow keeper recoiled as if burned. "You bind yourself," it hissed. "If he falls, you fall with him." "So be it," the king answered. The boy let out a slow breath. Then I want to see," he said, voice shaking but clear. "I don't want it to eat my wish or my mom's smile." The vampire king stood and reached out his hand. His fingers were long and pale, the silver ring cold and heavy. The boy hesitated only a second before placing his small, gloved hand into it. A surprising warmth flowed into his skin, like a campfire finally reaching someone who had been standing just outside its circle. The bus around them blurred, colors smearing, metal bending into streaks. The frozen snowflakes brightened, turning into tiny orbs of soft light. The world tilted, not in a dizzy way, but like a door gently opening. "Do not do this," the shadow keeper pleaded. "You remember what it is, my king. You remember who it once was." For the first time, the boy saw true pain on the vampire king's face. Not physical, but memory. Regret as sharp as glass. "I remember," the king said quietly. "That is exactly why I must go." The ground under their feet softened into darkness, like stepping onto deep black water that somehow held their weight. The city faded, the bus, the lamp, the wreaths, all dissolving into a vast midnight field lit only by the hovering, frozen snowlights. In the distance, shapes moved. Tall, thin towers made of shattered mirrors, bending toward each other like tired giants. "What is this place?" the boy asked, voice tiny in the huge, silent space. "This," the king replied, "is where forgotten wishes come to drown." As his words faded, something shifted near the closest tower. A figure pulled itself free from the mirror glass, made of darkness so thick it seemed to drink the light around it. Its eyes were not red like the king's, nor silver like the keeper's. They were a dull, endless gray, like ashes after a fire. When it spoke, its voice carried the echo of 100 children saying, "It's fine, I didn't really want it," while their hearts cracked a little inside. "You broke your law," it crooned, drifting closer. "You walked into my sea with a living wish on your leash." The boy flinched at the sound. The king stepped in front of him, cloak of red a barrier between the child and the creature. "You were once under my protection," the king said, his jaw tight. "You were once my son of the night. You should know better than to hunt where I walk." The gloom feeder laughed, a low, bitter sound. "You protected me by turning me into a ghost," it said. "You saved my life and stole my childhood. Now I feed on every child you abandon. Tell me, king, how many of your regrets built these towers?" The boy's heart hammered. He looked at the twisting mirrors, at the reflections of faces he didn't recognize. Children blowing out candles alone, clutching letters that were never mailed, watching doors that never opened. His stomach knotted. Somewhere in one of those reflections, he caught a glimpse of himself, sitting by a small cake with no candles, his mother's tired eyes saying, "Next year, baby. We'll make it special next year." He realized, with a cold shock, that if he turned away now, he would become one of those fading faces. The gloom feeder's gray gaze slid to him. "Ah," it sighed. "There you are, little skipped wish, little almost forgotten. I could let you go back, you know, let you grow into a man who laughs at magic and says, 'Christmas is for kids.' You'd never miss what you lost. You'd never cry again for what didn't happen." The idea sounded strangely peaceful and horribly empty. "Or," the creature continued, voice silkier, "I could take your hope now. Gently, no screaming, no pain, just a soft, quiet giving up. You would sleep so soundly inside my shadow, and your mother would stop promising things she cannot give." The boy's knees went weak. The king felt the child's hand tremble in his and knew the danger. Not that the creature would snatch him by force, but that it would convince him to walk willingly into its arms. Behind them, the shadow keeper whispered urgently, "Your power is limited here tonight. You cannot defeat it by strength. If you reach too deep into the dark, you will drag the boy with you. You will bind his soul tonight." The vampire king stared at the gloom feeder, at the twisted echo of the first child he had ever tried to save. He had built this enemy with his own desperate kindness. Now it stood between this new boy and the future he deserved. If he did nothing, the gloom feeder would eat the child's belief until he was just another hollow adult. If he unleashed the full weight of his power, the boy might survive, but changed forever, pulled into the same half-life that had ruined the first. There was one other option, a path no vampire king had ever taken. It would require something he had not offered anyone in centuries, his own heart laid bare, without the armor of darkness. He looked down at the boy, at the small, stubborn face still holding onto that one simple wish. The child met his eyes, searching them for an answer, for a reason to trust either the shadow or the king. "Can you really help us?" the boy whispered. "Or am I just another mistake for you?" The king felt the question like a blade. This was the edge of everything, his law, his guilt, his chance to become something more than a legend of fear. Slowly, deliberately, he released the ancient shields around his heart. The red glow in his eyes softened. For the first time in centuries, he let someone see the man he had been before the monster. "Yes," he said, voice raw but steady. "I can help you, but only if I do the one thing I swore I would never do again." The gloom feeder hissed, sensing what was coming. The shadow keeper's silver eyes widened in alarm. The boy's fingers tightened around the king's hand. Then do it," he said. "Please." The vampire king drew in a deep, useless breath and stepped forward, pulling the boy with him, straight toward the waiting darkness. choosing, in that impossible moment, to risk his own eternal soul on a single fragile human wish.